So today we'll be talking about Chaos Zero Nightmare to air out the issues that I have with the game and what I'm hoping will come in the future for it. But before that, disclaimer. I like the game a lot so far. It's actually been a real blast to play. I'm treating it as more of a free-to-play Slay the Spire or Chrono arc, and it's meeting those expectations wonderfully. The core roguelike game loop and combat that it has is very addicting, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for creative builds with characters and teams. I'll put a link in the description of a quick breakdown of the game loop if you're curious, but now let's get on to the bulk of the discussion. Let's talk localization. There are card effects and keywords that don't make much sense because of that awkward translation or unclear wording that they have. The more upfront example of there being a localization issue is for Rosaria, where her ability of drawing one enhanced cards doesn't really explain what enhanced cards are. I think that means any card that had an epiphany on it, because I would consider that to be enhanced just naturally. That actually just means the upgrade type of card, where this should really be saying draw one upgrade card. If there are no upgrade cards in the draw pile, draw one. Let's now move on to the next point. Gachification holds the game back. So speaking in terms of the monetization aspects, it's a 50-50 system with the character banner and a 100% guaranteed chance for getting the 5-star rate up partner. I'll be focusing on the character banner. It's unfortunate to see that Smilegate and Super Creative have decided to adopt the Hoyo status quo in terms of how they do their monetization strategy for characters. Monetization aside, they've also demonstrated a willingness with how dupes bring power into characters. Take Haru for example. She's the first limited unit and her E2 actually changes her game plan. That's cool design wise, but I would have preferred if those changes were just built into her base kit or a potential rather than locked behind duplicates. Make it be something earnable through play rather than something earnable through pay. Now they've gone ahead and went with implementing a compromise for this, by being able to get dupes through mileage. Early on, you're getting a lot of currency from first-time clears, achievements, and account progression, but after a couple of weeks of play, you're out of sources for premium currency and relying on daily income. So unless you're spending, I would be willing to predict that you're going to miss out on building every 5-star character you'll want to build through earnable income to their E2 breakpoint. If Super Creative and Smilegate, as seen with Haru, has the assumption that you as the player can eventually get E2 for a character through mileage, they may lean towards keeping these character game plan changes locked behind dupes, dangling E2 value within reach rather than just having it built into the character, because that makes more money. Moving back to the overall banner system, it inherently affects gameplay by limiting your options for creativity and opportunities to experiment with varying deck building options. I feel that for the genre of roguelike deck building, that you'll want to be able to experiment and have a sandbox of options to choose from. Now let's move into something more gameplay related, the Basin of Hyperspace. It's similar to Star Rail's Memory of Chaos, 2 teams, multiple floors, cycle requirements, the usual. And that design makes sense for Star Rail because the game is fairly deterministic outside of energy regeneration based on the enemy targeting and how that works. You can plan your turn order by manipulating speed stats and then piloting the characters to their potential. But in Chaos Zero Nightmare, it's a card game, right? There's draw RNG, and the fact that your team's game plan might come from units needing to rev up the engine first. So for example, my discard Renoa style team might take too many cycles to be able to one-shot. A retain barrel style deck might also take too many cycles to be able to one-shot. They're both solid options in terms of doing content, but specifically for this style of content, it's very much leaning towards being able to pump out as much damage as possible, as soon as possible. And going back to that draw RNG point, outside of your initial starting hand potentially having Outbreak of War cards and that guarantees your initial mulligan, even with that in mind, because of that non-deterministic or random behavior that you can have, having the in-game content rely on cycle timing seems odd. Personally, I would prefer if it were simple binary results. Did you clear it or not? Instead of, did you clear it in X number of cycles? We'll leave the in-game discussion at that for now. Let's now move on to the wishlist portion of the video where I talk about things I'm hoping will come in the future for Chaos Zero Nightmare. You've got your usual material farming chores, which means spending time on content you don't necessarily enjoy, just to level up the units you want to use. You're bottlenecked by stamina. This slows your roster growth and forces you to focus on one unit at a time. This is not an uncommon problem. Every gacha game suffers this issue that has stamina. whenever I have to do this content that is going to be boring to sit through, let me have a sweep function. Then there's this annoying nuance with consultation passes. It's the currency they use to give psychotherapy to your discombobulated units, but for some reason as well, it's also the currency used for affinity events. I'm not really sure why there's a daily resource used between two separate game systems. It wouldn't be too much of an issue, but counseling interacts directly with the core game loop, but at least it's not stamina, right? And even then, affinity building itself is a slog to build up, with having a chance for the unit that you want to build affinity for not appearing at all to be able to do an affinity event with them. I had this happening with Calipe for 3 days in a row, and if I pull up an example for today, I want you to help me find Tressa. She's not here. She's not here either. She's not here. And I guess she just stayed home today. You can choose to build affinity through giving gifts, but even then you're bottlenecked by other systems in the game. So for this next bullet point, it's going to be revising the consultation pass as a resource, and fixing affinity building to not be such a slog. This is going to be a fast bullet point. Whenever I remove cards or replace them, make sure they actually stay permanently removed or replaced. I have this card Instinct Ignition that I replace, but then I get the save data and suddenly it comes back again. So breaking news, actually, they've actually identified an issue with save data where it was being applied abnormally, but what I really want to call out is the fact that they acknowledge that the rules behind save data has been only managed with them without being communicated well to us as players. And this shows that they're aware of the inconsistency problem with save data. So I'm going to leave this here as it's relevant to the current point that I'm making. Now this next part is going to be calling back to their developer discussion that they had before the launch of the actual game. They mentioned that the limited characters will rotate into the normal banner eventually. That's really good for us as players, but think later on in the future when eventually it'll just make the normal banner pool much more diluted. So it'll be a lot harder to target that limited character that you want to go for. So I'm hoping that by starting the discussion now, we can eventually get a wishlist feature once there becomes a cause of there being way too many limiteds that are also injected into the normal standard pool. So it'll be a good compromise between us as players to be able to at least skew the randomness in our favor a little bit, letting us create a wider roster, a more vertical roster, depending on how the player wants to use it. And that marks the final bullet point for this video. At the end of the day, this game is sick. Despite the flaws that come from the gacha, the unclear translations, and the other game design issues that I've mentioned before, this game has shown serious potential with its game loop. I just hope that SG and Super Creative can resolve these issues and reach CZN's maximum potential. And with that, that's all I got for today. So thank you for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Catch you later.